The chairs in the law office were as cold as the people sitting in them. I sat alone, just far enough to avoid touching elbows with Dexter or catching Celeste's perfectly powdered gaze. My mother, Viola, didn't even glance my way. She sat draped in beige silk, rings on every finger like medals from battles I was never invited to fight. Next to her stood Franklin Sloan, my stepfather. Sharp suit, sharper silence. He hadn't said a word since we walked in. The lawyer cleared his throat. A slick, neutral man named Hoffman, his voice thin, as though afraid to wake sleeping ghosts. He started listing assets. The Maui property to Dexter, the stocks and wine cellar to Celeste, a European art portfolio to Viola. I felt my stomach tighten with each word, the way a rope does before it snaps. Then, to Calla Marin the contents of one personal storage unit, address on file, and this. He slid an envelope and a single, rusted key across the polished table. I stared. Was this a joke? No one laughed. Dexter smirked. Celeste blinked slowly, as if surprised I even showed up. Viola didn't blink at all. I picked up the key. It stained my fingers orange. My name was scribbled on the envelope in familiar, tired handwriting. I looked at the lawyer. He looked at the floor. Have you ever been written out of your own family story? I stood up slowly, the air around me cracking with humiliation I refused to let leak into tears. No one stopped me as I walked out, rusted key in one hand, dignity barely intact in the other. The road to Marin Auto and Tool hadn't changed. The same cracked asphalt, the same eucalyptus trees leaning too close to the highway. But everything else had. My father's laughter had once filled these back roads. Now it echoed only in memory. He used to let me sit on the hood of his truck while he cleaned carburetors. Listen to the engine, he'd say. It tells you what's wrong. You just have to hear it. Now the only thing talking was the wind through a cracked window. The garage sat just outside the city limit, tucked behind an abandoned gas station like a secret someone meant to forget. The sign hung crooked, Marin Auto and Tool. Faded letters, one side broken. I parked, headlights slicing into the dust. For a moment I didn't move. This wasn't just a building. It was a tomb. I stepped out. Gravel crunched beneath me like old bones. The key fit into the lock, almost too perfectly. The door groaned open. Darkness spilled out, thick and familiar. Inside it smelled of oil, metal, and something else, time maybe. What's one place they told you meant nothing, but you always knew it meant everything? The flashlight trembled slightly in my hand as I moved past empty shelves and dusty benches. My boots left marks in the dust. I followed a trail of shapes under canvas tarps, each one like a sleeping beast. I pulled back one cover and froze. A car. No, the car. An Aston Martin DB5. Immaculate. Untouched. My breath caught. This shouldn't be here. Not hidden. Not buried under neglect. Why? I looked around, suddenly alert. Found a wall cabinet. It was locked. I tried a number. My father's birthday. Click. Inside was a safe. And inside that, an envelope yellowed but sealed. Scrawled across it. For Calla, only when they forget you. My fingers shook as I opened it. They will never see you, but I always did. This is yours, because you were never their mistake. I bit my lip. The words cut deeper than the key ever could. Buried beneath the letter were papers, bank records, monthly deposits, a large sum, transferred consistently for years to an account listed only by initials. This wasn't just a keepsake. This was a legacy. His legacy. For me. Ever needed just one person to believe in you. To finally believe in yourself. I let the light skim the edges of the car again. The letter still open in my hands. That's when I saw it. Through the dust on the window, a flash. Headlights. Faint. Distant. But not moving. Someone was watching. I lunged forward, grabbed the documents, shoved them into my bag. My breath was too loud. My fingers scrambled for the safe. Slammed it shut. I backed away. Every instinct screamed. On the inside panel of the safe door, taped carefully, was another envelope. This one smaller. Colder. Open only when you trust no one. I locked the garage. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. I just stared into the rearview mirror. They had followed me. Or maybe they were already here. My mind raced. Franklin. Celeste? Viola? Had they suspected? They underestimated me. Again. Good. I turned the key. The engine roared. As the taillights of my car vanished down the dirt road, the garage stood silent once more. As I drove off, I didn't know who I feared more, the ones who cut me off, or the ones still pretending they didn't. The envelope still sat on my kitchen table, untouched since midnight. The one that read, "Open only when you trust no one." But I hadn't opened it, not yet. I was too busy opening everything else my family had tried to bury. At the center of my small cottage, I spread out the documents I had pulled from the garage safe. It felt almost sacred, the way I arranged each paper on the table. Stock certificates, charters, faded business ledgers. My hands trembled with each discovery. Then I found it, a stock certificate, so old the ink had bled into the parchment. Calla Marin, co-owner, Marin Auto and Tool, 2006. 17 years ago. I sat back stunned. They'd made me feel invisible. All this time I thought I was forgotten. But I'd been written in. Not erased, buried. I made copies of everything. The originals went into a locked folder, hidden beneath floorboards. My stomach turned. If they find this, I whispered aloud, everything's over. Have you ever found proof that you always belonged, only to have someone deny it? The silence answered. The next morning, I found a letter slid under my front door. No return address. Inside, just one line, "You're not Marin by blood." By afternoon, my phone rang. "Viola." "We're concerned," she said, voice cold as glass. "You've been emotional. I think it's time we cleared the air. Come by this evening." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. When I arrived, Viola had the living room staged like a courtroom. Alex was there, stiff beside Franklin, who looked like a man rehearsing patience. Viola sat in the center, Queen of the Damage Control Council. "Don't ruin lives for money and pride, Calla," she said smoothly. "This behavior, it's beneath you." I didn't respond. Not immediately. The static on the line earlier. The car that lingered behind me last night. The shadow in the window that vanished when I turned on the porch light. It all made sense now. Does betrayal hurt deeper when it comes from blood? They weren't protecting me. They were circling me. I walked out with a smile that fooled no one. Back at the cottage, I booted up Alex's old laptop. She had given it to me years ago, too lazy to wipe it clean. I'd kept it out of spite. The scan popped up in a folder labeled Travel Docs. A PDF. Transfer of ownership. My name. My shares. Signed away. Dated 3 weeks ago. Trembling hands. Tears I couldn't stop. I dropped to the floor. My breath came in short bursts. It wasn't just erasure. It was replacement. Franklin's signature. Alex's. Viola's approval. I gathered every document from the garage. The letters. The certificate. My father's handwriting. Everything. I wasn't going to break. Not this time. When I confronted Alex, she barely blinked. "Dad made a mistake," she said flatly. Viola stood behind her, arms crossed. "You always were too sentimental, Calla. This is business." That night, I hired my own lawyer. We filed for fraud, forgery, wrongful disinheritance. Then I called an old college friend, now a journalist. I emailed her scans of everything. The next morning, headlines read, "Daughter disinherited, secret garage, hidden fortune, and legal firestorm." I knew they'd see it. By the afternoon, Viola's friends were already canceling dinners. Franklin tried to issue a press release. Half apology, half threat. The courtroom was set. The judge allowed the documents. The local news camped outside the courthouse. Alex refused to look at me. "This isn't revenge," I told the cameras. "It's truth." When silence fails, sometimes the truth must be shouted loud. Inside the courtroom it was war. Their lawyers tried to discredit me. Franklin claimed the signature was symbolic. Viola said I misunderstood the inheritance. Alex didn't speak. But the letter, the stock certificate, my father's recorded message, retrieved from an old USB drive I found in the Aston Martin's glove box, all told a different story. Public opinion shifted. Outside, signs read, "Justice for Calla." Truth in the tool shed. And yet inside I was alone. The house was quiet now. Franklin had gone into hiding. Viola's social calendar had dried up. Alex, once the golden girl, was now whispered about in grocery stores. Still, it wasn't victory. Not yet. My savings dwindled. Lawyers weren't cheap. The emotional toll, worse than the financial one. I felt hollow, like I'd built a bonfire and forgot to keep warm. But I wasn't broken. I stood in the cottage, looked out the window, and saw the trees sway with a breeze I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't the same Calla. I had no interest in the past anymore. Until the phone rang. No caller ID. I picked up. "You think you've won," a voice said softly. "But you don't know who else holds that key." My blood ran cold. Truth was only the beginning. What they feared most was what's next. The night before the verdict, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wasn't afraid of the outcome. I was afraid of what winning would cost. The call came just after midnight. No ID, just a whisper. "Be careful who you trust with what's left." I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. I sat alone in my small office, beneath a desk lamp that hummed louder than the night. The letter from my father lay open again. "Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration," he had written. I read it 3 times before setting it down and closing my eyes. People think the hardest part is the fight, but it's not. The hardest part is deciding who you become after the fight ends. I could have pushed for charges. I could have dragged them through every courtroom in the state. But what would that make me? So I made a choice. I wrote a motion demanding a public apology and restitution. Nothing more. What would you do if vengeance was easy but peace was harder? Morning broke slowly, like it too was unsure of what came next. In the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Reporters filled the back row. Viola wore a veil, subtle, dramatic. Franklin didn't bother with subtlety. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Alex didn't look at me. The judge took his seat, glasses low on his nose, face unreadable. He spoke for 10 minutes, listing findings, violations, and acknowledgments. Then he said the words I didn't realize I'd needed to hear until I heard them. The assets in question are hereby transferred to Ms. Calamarin. Fraud is confirmed. The court recommends restitution. No criminal charges are filed at Ms. Marin's request. And then Viola stood. With trembling hands, she adjusted her scarf and stepped to the microphone. I forged Joseph's initials. I did it to protect what I believed was his legacy. There was no applause, just silence. Alex turned her face to the wall. Franklin stood mid-session and left without a word. Outside, headlines exploded. Social media turned me into a symbol I never asked to be. Ever had to stand for truth when no one stood with you? Back at the cottage, I opened a new file. Not legal papers this time, but a plan. I sold the Aston Martin. Not because I needed the money, because I needed the motion. With those funds, I launched the Marin Foundation for Silent Daughters. Our mission? Help women whose voices had been buried beneath family shame, generational gaslighting, or simply being born into the wrong story. Noah, who used to sweep up my dad's garage, now helped run the foundation. We worked out of a small office just off the coast where fog rolled in every morning like memory and left by noon like peace. On a cool October afternoon, I drove to my father's grave. The hill overlooked the town he would have like that. I left an engraved ignition key atop the headstone. It read, "For those who are always meant to drive their own story." I whispered, "Thank you for seeing me before I saw myself." Then I walked away, this time not because I had to, but because I had somewhere else to be. Have you ever turned your pain into someone else's healing? Months passed. Viola disappeared from public life. Some say she moved to the desert. Others say she joined some spiritual retreat in Sedona. I didn't care to find out. Dexter, who once laughed when I cried, emailed me. He'd tried reviving the family business. Failed. Then tried a podcast. Failed again. Now he was reaching out. Not for money. For advice. He asked how I built something out of everything they broke. I didn't answer right away. Then I sent him a list of grants and mentorship groups. No forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe a blueprint. And maybe that's enough for now. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and my office bathed in gold, I found a manila envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me, maybe 5 years old, sitting on someone's lap. A woman, not Viola, laughing, holding me like I was the only thing that mattered. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "You were never just his." I sat there, letting that sentence echo through me. Would you reopen your wounds if it meant finally knowing who you really are? Because the past wasn't done with me yet.